A lot's happening. So the headline in the Standard today is Ruto beats court to a bloated government. Bloated government. Why? Because there are 50 new chief administrative secretaries who were sworn in yesterday. They're already in office. And yet there's a case that had gone to court where somebody was seeking to have this matter halted. Okay? But then the matter was due back in court yesterday at 9 a.m. By that time, we're already gone somewhere far. Now, 50 CASs, the conversation about the 50 and what is going to cost the people, what's going to cost taxpayers basically to have those CASs in office, having them getting everything that comes with it. Every CAS, remember, means office, means vehicle, means security, means very many things, means assistant, means personal assistant, means... So they come with an entire battery of other people. But the Attorney General, Justin Muturi, has defended the appointment of additional 27 CASs and wants the court to dismiss a petition that's seeking to bar them from assuming office. Through State Counsel Emmanuel Bita, the AG argues that the suit by Eliud Matindi lacks merit and has already been overtaken by events because, of course, those people are already in office. What are you talking about? In any case, the dispute is about the appointment to a public office, which is a reserve of the Employment and Labour Relations Court and not this High Court. The AG argues that, look, these 27 are coming to serve the people. And he's basically questioning the merit of Mr. Matindi going to court and asking all these things. As they assume office, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has already done some things, Ramah.
Yeah, it certainly has. So essentially what they're trying to do here is to adjust the pay packages rather that these CASs would essentially be receiving. So in essence, if you take everything combined, basic salary 459,000 shillings, house allowance courtesy of the Kenyan taxpayer 165.
Basic salary 400 and?
Basic salary 459.
59.
You have a house allowance of 165,000 shillings, more than $1,000. You have your commuter allowance doesn't even come into picture because you know we're paying for all these vehicles that you're moving around with, fueling them, providing security, drivers, yada, yada, yada. Then there's a salary market adjustment. And that's going to have to raise some interesting questions in there. 155,000 Kenyan shillings. So if you sort it all up, 780 grand is a number that you're looking at the end of the day. And that moves them just above what principal secretaries have as their take-home pay is around 765. Sorry, not take-home pay, gross pay, 765,000 Kenyan shillings.
And then the CAS is going to be at 780.
So there's a difference of about 20k, give or take. Sorry, no, is it 20k? No, 15, give or take, right? Between these two.
It's important.
But at the end of the day, you know, principal secretaries, accounting officers in ministries, these are individuals who more for the not have actually gotten there by merit, right? These are individuals who they actually do the proper
They've been in the
work,
public service, then,
right?
Yeah.
They put, when, for example, if you're trying to negotiate a new facility with the World Bank or the IMF, more for than not, the technical work, those teams, it's a PS. This essentially is a classical example of State House deciding to prioritize rewarding political loyalty. Damn the taxpayers. That's along the short of it. Because I fail to see what value CASs bring to the table. What is it that they're doing that PSs are not already doing?
Okay. When the mention of CASs, the numbers, the required numbers, the suggested numbers by Kinyua, when did this conversation begin? Last week, the week before last?
Which one?
The CAS. It goes back to Uhuru Kenyatta. Okay? Matter went to court.
Yep.
Halt until it is determined. I'm paraphrasing and moving it quickly. It was determined. It is okay, you can have CASs. Okay? But you need to have 23. We have 50. Have you seen how the conversation of the CASs has dominated our minds? Among other things. We get granular about what they're earning, what they're supposed to earn. Okay. Ramah, if you're to do a little quick maths, 50 of them at this horrendous amount that we keep mentioning, how much money are we talking about, say, monthly? Because if we start with monthly, then
We can land somewhere.
We can land somewhere like, say, quarterly, yearly. This is what they're going to earn. You see? But it has occupied our minds, has it not?
It has.
Yes. It has occupied our minds even more than the issue of drought. It has occupied our minds even more than the issue of hunger. It has occupied our minds even more than now the issue of this deluge of water that we are now having to deal with.
So, to answer your question, you're looking at roughly, 39 million, Bob, give or take.
A month.
Every month, so roughly 460-something million in a year. It's essentially an acceptable cost if you're looking at it in context of the budget.
Precisely.
But, and this is where I think for most taxpayers and most citizens, this is what galls them. It's the in your face, I will do this at your cost and there's nothing you can do about itness of it. That is fundamentally wrong here. It's the brazen flouting of, I am supposed to be the steward of your tax dollars, because I'm pretty sure I can find a better use for $3.5 million every single year. That $3.5 million can do something on irrigation. That $3.5 million can do something else on maintaining our roads. That $3.5 million can do something on help.
It can.
But here we are saying, no. The better choice, according to State House, is to reward political cronies who will do absolutely nothing for you.
Actually, it makes a lot of political sense. If
political sense, yes.
If I am to take the argument and use the trajectory they're using, it makes a lot of political sense. And also, in reality, if we look at, it's an amazing way in which politicians agree. Uhuru Kenyatta says we lose 2 billion shillings daily. Conversation around that goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
And he never substantiates it.
No. Then, by the way, we get into figures. A gentleman who was then head of ethics and anti-corruption called Kinisu comes about him, he does a little arithmetic. Says, no, this thing is not 2 billion, it's 2.79 billion. Now, then we move it forward. We have Mandamano. The deputy president tells us we lost 2 billion in that one day. 2 billion. Now, is this 2 billion separate from the 2 billion we were losing previously? Because if it's in addition, then it means corruption plus that one.
On that day, we lost 4
billion. Pop now. 4 billion can pay these guys salaries for how many years?
Oh, several.
5 years. 5 years. You've paid the salary of these CSs with the money that we lose.
And have change.
And have change. Okay? Why am I going into this? I have given this thing thought, and I am of the view, what you're calling in your face is true, but it's deliberate. Dead cutting, I keep mentioning it. We are being occupied by issues that divert our attentions from the real issues that we're supposed to deal with on a daily basis. The things that ought to be done. Because this the government can do. Okay, now what about the other things that concern a larger population? Are they being done? No, but this is the focus. And Eric mentioned this a while back, and said, this one will end, then they'll bring something else. Then something else will come on.
It's a cycle of distraction.
It's a cycle of distraction. You're constantly being distracted. The president goes to Kisii. Now, help comes into focus. And the discussion around help, it follows a pattern of always picking on an issue that you know is something that a certain group of people consider thorny and tricky. And you address it by talking about money that has been set aside for it. And people cheer wildly. And then after that, you chill. And something else will come up. And something else will keep coming up. But the pertinent issues that we need to focus on a daily basis keep taking a backseat.
Why are we not focusing on those pertinent issues?
Well, because we are being assisted in ensuring we don't focus on them.
No, we also have very short-term memories around here.
Because we are the ones who are focusing on those issues. If you talk about this 39 million shillings that's going to be spent to pay the 50 chief administrative secretaries who will perform some certain roles in government, okay? That's 39 million shillings in a month to pay the 50 people. That's what is occupying us. How much has it costed us to transport the president from Nairobi to Kisii? I mean, if you want to start looking at, how much money are we spending?
Or how much...
Look at it in entirety then.
Yeah.
And start to sort out the details.
To just move President William Ruto from Nairobi
To Kisii.
to Kisii
For that tour.
How
much does it cost?
How much does it cost? So what is this 39 million shillings? Can we look at and see what are they supposed to be doing and then move on and focus. So what do we want? You said people are sleeping hungry. Why aren't we focusing ourselves on who are these people and where are they? Are they being fed? Why aren't we focusing our attention on, all right, how many people are receiving this fertilizer? Do they have access to this fertilizer?
Yes.
Have they received it? Are they using it? Is it working? Why aren't we asking ourselves those issues? We can't always be blaming somebody else for distracting us. Why are we being distracted if we were really focused?
Actually, it is almost impossible to be focused in the times in which we live. You know why? The moment you have a real situation of uncertainty, the first casualty is focus. Because your attention
is focused on survival.
Just basic survival on a day-to-day basis. So everything else is an extra. And so if somebody introduces a new extra, it'll follow a certain trajectory or a flow of things that you're dealing with.
And yet we still have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Because these it's not that we'll have the luxury of being able to deal with these things one at a time. It will simply not happen, right? Politicians are politicians. I will throw distraction 1, I will throw distraction 2, and then I will go off and do something completely different in the background, right? While you're still trying to figure out what
exactly is happening,
right? That is the nature of the game that is being played here. We have to adapt to that. Right, and yes, $39 million shillings a month sounds small on the face of it, but in addition to everything else that is happening, still worth fighting about.
The principle of it is the issue. Why do you add a new expenditure when we have people who cannot afford to eat on a daily basis? And yet, if you are to get granular, as we are suggesting, on the largest scheme of things, that amount is not something we should be quibbling about. Not really.
Well, we should be quibbling about it because every single cent, especially right now, and government tends to sort of ignore these issues and gloss over them. These are the same guys who came into government and said, you know what, we're going to focus on giving taxpayers value for money. We are not here to waste cash. etc., etc., etc. We will essentially find $3 billion, 300 billion shillings worth, right, of spending cuts to make on wasteful expenditure. And ever since they got in, they've done the complete opposite of those things. That's $3 billion in spending cuts, virtually did not materialize. We're going to eliminate wasteful subsidies. Us oil marketing companies over here, they're still struggling to get payments for subsidies, right? You and I, when you go to the pump, put in petrol, diesel, buy kerosene, you're basically paying for these subsidies. It's not that the money is not flowing into Treasury's coffers. But yet, from Treasury to OMCs, there's a problem here. That money is simply not going where it should be. Now, you know, in some cases, it was diverted to do other things like paying SGR costs. But at the end of the day, you know, we don't exactly have money to waste here. And things are getting really, really tight, not just domestically, but on the international front.
The underlying thought here is that these individuals who then are in these positions would not necessarily be fulfilling any duty that is already not being done at the ministerial level.
True.
And I think that's where the problem is here. That the thought is, so what exactly are these 50 individuals going to do? The initial number was 23, so maybe there was seen to be some kind of need or some kind of holes that they would then be able to plug. But when you add another 27, the question then becomes, what exactly are they going to do? And it's the value for that money. Because if you take that 39 million shillings per month and you ask yourself, realistically, are there other holes that the country is currently suffering from that could be filled with that? Now, if you look at it over the long run, and you ask yourself, okay, it was then paid in salaries and allowances to these CASs. Did they give value that can actually be seen and recognized for the country? And I think that is what the long run question would be. Would there be value derived from this additional spending? Because that's when spending makes sense. At whatever level you want to look at it, that you spend a shilling or you spend 10 million, did you get value for that?
And what's the opportunity cost?
Absolutely. And that's the thing right here. Will they give it back?
Because 39 million, you know, you could say, yeah, it's small change in the larger scheme of things. You know, 39 million.
But what are you getting for it? What are you getting for it?
Political stability, like City
said.
Today,
can we answer a question? Can we answer the question?
$3.5 million for political stability.
Yes.
Right,
when these people are in office, they're representing various interests. And like you said, yeah, they're political rejects. Exactly that. They represent a certain political constituency.
When did we first...
Hang on, sorry.
For whose benefit?
But why?
For the country's
We
benefit.
are going to have a handshake.
But why is political opposition a bad thing?
No,
It isn't.
Nobody said political opposition is a bad thing.
Yeah, but why do we need to pay off political failures, for lack of a better word, to essentially ensure political stability?
But is that not the national conversation we're having?
Yes.
We are actually going to have a handshake. Call it whatever you want to call it. We are going to have a handshake. What's the cost of that? Why? Oh, you cannot dismiss the fact that this person on this side got this kind of people, the supporters. They bring in this kind of people. The cost of that handshake is what we're starting with here at the bottom.
The counter argument could just as easily be, hang on, but what has stopped anyone from the Azimio side from actually acting like a proper opposition?
Sorry? What has stopped them from?
What's stopping them from acting like a proper opposition?
That's a very big question. It's a very important question. It is not an important question in this country.
Because
I'm just speaking the reality of things.
For the life of me, I don't see the value of using $3.5 million a year out of taxpayers' pocket to essentially try and maintain political stability. Because let's face it, these guys can't deliver that. They just can't.
Let me ask you this question.
They are not the stable ones.
When in 2008, when we had that coalition government, it's the first time we had this lovely experience of a very bloated, very, very bloated government. Did it serve a purpose? I'm asking the question, did it serve a purpose?
A long-term purpose?
No. Let's start with purpose first, then we can get into...
It served a purpose, but that purpose did not have to last 5 years, in my opinion.
But at the same time, I think
and the price that we paid was hefty as well.
But we're also making a slight apples to oranges comparison, because at least back then it was a case of, let's say, we're splitting ministerial positions, assistant ministerial positions, and back then you could legitimately say, cabinet minister will have to go and defend XYZ in parliament, assistant minister have to go and defend this, that, and the other in parliament. What does CASs do?
That's
they're
what
they're not even involved in crafting policy.
Those are the ones. When you hear that the cabinet secretaries will be going to parliament, that is exactly the job description of the CAS. That they will be the ones who go and speak. On behalf of Linturi, you'll have the 3 CASs. On behalf of Eliodowalo, you'll have Dennis Itumbi and the other 2 CASs.
In which case,
on behalf of Mbetheka Linturi, you'll have, what's her name, Millicent Omanga, going to respond in parliament.
And yet, these are people who are not even accountable, because when you're signing policies, their names are not on the dotted line.
No, they're not.
It's cabinet secretaries, it's principal secretaries, and that's pretty much it. These guys are a waste of time and money.
They're spokespersons for the ministry in parliament.
Rama, let me put your mind at ease here. Okay? No raising of blood pressure, nothing. Okay? Okay? Rule of law. If the impediment is a statute of law, we will change it. And once we change it, then this problem that you have will cease. Okay? Remember, one of the benefits of having a majority in parliament is you can do what you like. It's not complicated. The reason why I asked about the 2008 Nusum Kati government, the half a loaf government, is simply this. What were we dealing with? A structural issue or a political issue? What? It was political, was it not?
Political.
But what did it set in motion? Precisely. We are dealing with that right now.
And yet, knowing what we know.
Yes, we do. And that's why
we should have learned our lessons from 2008.
We have learned. We have learned.
We learned the wrong lessons.
Actually, that you would argue is debatable. Even the learning process is debatable. The lessons were there in abundance for people to learn. But whether they learned
it or not, that one is up to you.
Whether you took in the right lesson. Anyway, I think bottom line, I agree with you, Ramah. It raises all these questions. It is not just 39 million. 39 million is what the salary is going to be.
Exactly.
Maintaining this 50 CAS is going to be another cost. Because there's going to be cost of chai, mandas.
There will be people attached to them.
Yes. Everybody else that comes around them,
Yes.
There's the maintenance and servicing of the vehicles, there's police that are attached to them. There's an entire cost. And these other costs usually amount to about 300 billion shillings every year in our budget. just running these two things.
You know, in my mind,
we are increasing it.
Even that 300 billion is of no consequence.
Let me tell you something.
Let's take a break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
And our guest host, business journalist Ramah Nyang, looking at the position of the CASs and the SRC now saying, okay, let's adjust so that the CASs can earn more than the PSs and less than the CSs, because that's where they are. CS, CAS, PS. Now, surely you must structure it nicely. So CASs now, they're going to be earning about 780,000 shillings per month.
Yep.
Right? And there are more allowances that the CRC has reviewed in terms of the public service, which are, is it introducing or not scrapping?
So essentially what they're trying to do is to increase travel allowances for state officers who are going to be working, doing official duties in towns outside Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, and Nakuru. So essentially what they want to do is essentially to change, and this is now quoting directly from the Business Daily, the agency wants to change the current practice where daily travel allowances are pegged on job groups and towns being visited. With those travelling to Nairobi, for example, pocketing as much as 67% more than those who are visiting towns outside cities and county headquarters. And they're proposing to scrap the current rate, which have been in place since 2017, I think. So you're looking at, for example, daily travel allowances will go up by between 1,200 and 8,000 shillings for government officials as assignments outside cities and county headquarters like, Malindi, Naivasha, and so on. On balance, it's... in as much as it grinds my gears that we have all these highly paid individuals, at the top end of the stack, the fact is that public sector remuneration, in some cases, does tend to be relatively low. But is it justifiable to start raising per diems at this point? How they then track things around accountability? You keep reading audit reports from pretty much every single ministry and state-owned entity, and by and large, there's always going to be a problem in accountability about getting this money out.
This is it. Is it apt in terms of time to have a conversation about that accountability factor that we mentioned and say, look, who then holds government accountable for the work that ought to be done? Is there a work plan? Is there a strategy that we say, okay, between January and December for the next 5 years, this is what is going to be required of ministries? You must do 1, 2, 3. Yep. Who asked the questions in terms of then, did you actually do what was set out to do? Here we are with these CSs today, and we've been convinced, or rather, the plan is to try and convince Kenya as a whole that these jobs are that these positions are necessary in order for a certain thing to be done. All right, who holds the measuring stick after all is said and done, and said, actually, you know what, that this position of whomever in the Ministry of Interior, for example, where there are, I believe it is, where there are CASs now. This is where we are today. This is what needs to be done. At the end of this period, who holds up the staff and says
that should
this
be
is
MPs.
actually done?
Because when ministries, if you look at the way the budget cycle works, essentially ministries come to the table and say, this is what we want to do over the next fiscal year and over the medium term. I want to, if you're the water ministry, this is what I want to do in terms of expanding water access. These are my KPIs. Need to build this number of dams, this number of collection ponds, this number of, I need to expand the percentage of houses that have connections to piped water to whatever the number is. I need to reduce, or rather to meet this specific target on water quality standards, right, across all of the water service boards. The KPIs are there. But MPs very rarely ever hold these individuals to account, because year after year after year, you'll see projects that ideally should have been finished the previous year, that money was allocated for, was simply not done.
Exactly.
Mombasa Road is a prime example in that, because as things currently stand, we've had, I think it's 2 successive CSs now for transport, basically saying, no, we'll fix Mombasa Road. We'll fix Mombasa Road. Nothing's being done.
Absolutely.
The damn thing is still
A dam. It's actually a dam.
Well, yeah, it is. It is a dam in more ways than one. It's got divots and bumps and cracks virtually everywhere. It's not properly marked, not properly painted, not well lit. The expressway is fantastic. Everything else under that, complete mess.
Yeah.
So for me, this is why we should be a little bit more than upset about saying you're going to have an entire institution around one individual as a CAS, and there's 50 of them, just like what you were saying, whether it is upkeep, whether it's drivers, security, whatever that is. You're creating an institution around this individual. For me, it wouldn't be look, and I'm being very honest here, it wouldn't be a problem if at the end of it, you're looking at it and say, actually, you know what? This is where it was. And as a result of this position,
we did exercise.
This is what has been achieved, and it can be directly linked to this individual and their institution. But if we're saying the very same parliament who rarely then is able to come and tell us, you guys, actually, you didn't meet the mark when it comes to what you're supposed to have done. And this is the same parliament who has been bypassed in the vetting of these individuals who are now in office.
Yep.
So do you mean to tell me that they're going to be able to come on these individuals and say, actually, you know what?
I would find
you didn't really do your job,
guys. I would find it quite interesting if UDA actually summoned the spine to say, you know what, we disagree with what's coming out of State House. We don't agree with this policy direction. This is fundamentally wrong. This is not representative of what should happen in a sensible, well-run, functioning society. I'm slightly cynical given their history, but I'm not sure that UDA as a party has a spine to actually say, you know what, State House, here you guys really screwed up.
But why do they need a spine? I mean, when your interest is being served by you being compliant, why do you want to rock the boat? If you owe the very seat you have in parliament to that particular political party, and by virtue of supporting that party, the likelihood of other goodies coming your way, goodies of the financial and economic nature, all these licenses being issued for importing all sorts of things. We have Freeport area now that's coming up. We have all manner of things where if you're compliant, the question I'm asking...
I don't disagree.
And I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, but the fact, I mean, and I know I'm going to sound like Jeremiah, shouting like the lone voice in the wilderness here, but on principle, what are you there for taxpayers to do? You
see, we often have this discussion assuming that they give a hoot about the taxpayer. They don't.
No, they never do. And
yes, we sometimes assume that even the thinking and everything that is said is actually purposed to benefit the taxpayer. It isn't.
And yet, CT, this entire structure is supposed to work for the benefit of the taxpayer.
Yes. So what do? You mollycoddle the taxpayer and give them the impression that their interest is being looked after.
Yes.
So,
and you can only do that for so long. At some point,
yes,
it blows up in your face.
It will. It most definitively will. But in the meantime, the reality we have is what we're dealing with here. You see, I actually feel that sometimes the long rope principle is a good one. If those in power seem to believe that the best way to run the country is to do exactly what they want, the way they want, then so be it. But you are setting in motion things which will come and strangle you, not anybody else. The very thing that you think you're going to achieve, you will achieve the complete opposite of it. Someone say, actually it isn't. This isn't even, I don't even need to be prophetic. No. It's really quite simple. There is a limit to how much suffering anyone can endure.
Honestly.
So you're saying we give them the rope?
These ones don't need to be given, they've taken it.
They've taken the rope.
They've taken the rope.
Allow them to keep the rope.
They didn't even take it, they seized it.
They're going to keep it. So we might as well not quibble about the rope. Let them go with the rope, wherever it is they want to go with the rope.
There's a problem though, City.
Why?
This is not like Toto Akililia Wembe Mpe, where them Toto will cut themselves and not cut you. This is like Toto Akililia Moto Mpe.
Actually,
they're going to burn the entire house.
You've got to the heart of the matter, Eric, because we are urging them on. So let it get to that point so that we can see our participation, because we don't see our participation. If indeed we said, folks, we've been having this discussion for now years, it's not months, and saying
the one about citizen participation.
Yeah, the responsibility of the citizen. Okay, if we have abrogated our responsibility, then they will run roughshod over us. So how do we get the citizenry to understand the ramifications of what they're doing? Because they're allowing it to happen. We have leaders we can hold to account. We have MCAs. We have these people. And many of them are accessible. But we do not hold them accountable. So
why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that for the majority of time, majority of people don't hold leaders accountable to say, excuse me, after this time when you promised that you were going to do 1, 2, 3, you actually didn't do it. We shout a little bit, we make noise, we shout about, oh, laptops income, oh, Stadia didn't happen. Okay, then somebody comes tomorrow and says, we're going to build, I think the number was 100 dams in 5 years. We're going to have 100 dams around the country.
You're going to have 5,000 megawatts of generation capacity by 2050.
I bet you that in 6 months, Kenya's going to produce its own mobile phone. Okay. Why do you think it is that after this period, after 6 months has come to an end, say, hold up, you said we're going to have 1, 2, 3. How come it's not happening? You said we're going to do this, and then somebody needs to just come to you a little bit and whisper in your ear and tell you, just give me a little, I'm going to actually have it done. Why do you think it is that we don't step on that thing and say, you said you were going to build 100 dams. We've seen the ravages of drought in the country. We know that this thing can actually save Kenya.
Ravages of rain.
We know that this thing can save Kenya. You said you were going to do it with the powers that you have under you as government. Why did you not do it?
You know what? We actually think that we are doing it.
Why?
If you ask Kenyans, they'll tell you that they are. However, we've polarized ourselves. Okay, the people who will turn up into the streets on Monday, some of them will be arguing that, that's what we are doing. We are demanding our leaders to do what is right. We are demanding that we are given the services that we ought to be receiving. We are demanding that our leaders do this and that. But the conversation will be tilted into this polarized system that these guys ought to be going out. And some of those who will be speaking are leaders who should be raising these questions in Parliament. Okay? Those that should be speaking in Parliament, those that should be saying, we are not even going to have a discussion about the privatization bill in the form that they want to bring it. Those that should be saying, we are not going to allow this kind of expenditure in the next budget if these are the things. We are going to look at our wage bill and see where this ought to be cut. And this is a proposal for how we ought to be cutting it. But no, we are polarizing it. We're going to be looking at the Azimio leaders who are more than 100 in Parliament, and they'll be on our side as we push against these Kenya Kwanza leaders who are
on
the other side. So people who should be saying, all of us should be saying, no, there's an issue with raising this wage bill further. It crossed the 520 billion mark last year. It's going to rise and continue rising. How much more are we spending to maintain just offices and this? How much more are we spending on travel, on meetings, on things that don't have to be done the way they're being done? How much, instead of asking all those questions collectively, we'll be sitting back and, depending on which side of the divide we are on today, we'll be justifying it. Charles says that he disagrees with me, there's not going to be a handshake. You watch this space. The moment a conversation changes now, and there is a recognition and realization of the opposition leaders, what they should be doing, and now we are working together. Those people who are on the streets will change that tune. We saw it in 2018. Suddenly it was, it's okay. We want to raise what? We want to raise the tax. Introduce tax on fuel, and it's okay. Introduce tax on gas, it's okay. It's a good thing.
It's 8% on VAT.
What we are going to do is we are going to reduce the price of the tax on Blue Band. That's what we saw in the last time. So our push as citizens has just been captured, and we are put into this polarized position.
So essentially,
either when someone is listening to you, they're thinking, this guy is supporting Kenya Kwanza, or this guy is anti-Kenya Kwanza. That's what we see.
This drought doesn't really care which political party you belong to. When it rained yesterday, you think the rain somehow went and consulted us and asked us which side of the political divide we are in. The moment our politics and the divisive nature of it becomes the center of our discussion and our being, then the issue that bedevils us cannot be looked at. Are you telling me that if I am in Kenya Kwanza over Azimio, wrong suddenly becomes right because of my political inclination. Wrong is wrong and right is right. It doesn't matter which part of the political inclination or divide I'm on. But we see your political position is what determines what is right and what is wrong.
You could have had one opinion at one point, and because you then were welcomed into a new fold, suddenly your opinion on the same matter changes completely. We've seen it time and time again.
Every single day. Until you sort of like you try to force this situation where you want to listen with your eyes, because your eyes sort of like bulge and think, what on earth am I hearing here? Is this the same person who said this the other day? But then, at the end of the day, there is a certain psychology that accompanies poverty. Okay? When you can't even figure out daily survival, believe me, all your instincts, all focus on that survival. And if there's even a gleam of hope, this particular government understands that really well, because all these promises, that's hope. Hope. Problem is, it doesn't work very well when there's biting hunger on a daily basis. Tomorrow is too long. It's too far away.
Yep.
Today becomes the issue.
And there are places not too far from here. I mean, I was in Kajiado last year, around October. Places that have not received, well, maybe they have now, but back then they'd not seen rain. The last time they'd seen rain was in 2020. So literally, you've gone through the entire pandemic, 2020, 2021, 2022.
No rain.
Not one drop of rainfall. At the same time, not one effort, not one shilling spent on trying to provide support. And it's not that we did not see these things coming, because you speak to farmers, you speak to the Grain Council of East Africa, speak to anyone in agricultural research. Anyone who looked at forecasts last year would have told you 2023, first quarter of the year, it's likely to be below par. We knew that these things were going to come. We could have planned ahead, done proper livestock offtake programs last year, but we didn't. Why? Well, we're in the middle of campaigns. We had an election to run. Year before that, we could have worried about things like, okay, we need, because the way it usually works is that the stresses will show up in the animal feed side well before they start showing up on maize prices, wheat prices, etc. And the stress signs are already there on wheat prices, in animal feed prices as well, because that's essentially now, it's the bran, the leftovers that we essentially would not use for human consumption. You turn that into animal feed. If the prices for that spikes, everything else
does.
Yep, it goes
will essentially follow. The signs were there. Nothing was done. And yet we decided, we have an election to run. So all these other things, preparing for food problems, preparing for water issues that are about to come, not a priority.
These things are beyond our control. They're beyond our control. I mean, it's because of the drought, and now you've seen what's happening in Ukraine. These things are beyond our control. But what is within our control is managing the election.
And that
was the argument.
And that is always such an incendiary argument, because at its core, it assumes that Kenyans are daft and not deserving of a proper response. Like, guys, we know these problems will come through. I mean, we've been talking about, and you've been around longer than I have, right? So your institutional memory is far better, right, than mine is here. You can speak of a time when rain seasons would be X, Y, Z, and it was consistent.
You knew.
Yeah. Now, forget my generation, the ones after me will be like, what rain seasons? What rain seasons are you people talking about? Because we haven't seen anything consistent in terms of rain seasons. We know that these problems exist. We know we're going into a hotter, drier future. Where's the spending on agricultural research? Where's the spending on seed propagation? You keep charging farmers money to move produce from point A to point B. You're making the price of food much, much more expensive than it should be.
Yep.
So, and yet we turn around and say, oh, no, we're going to lower the cost of food. Okay, show me how county governments have removed cess taxes. Because that, again, and I know you're going to raise this point, it's a political issue. Because the instant the central government will show up and say, no, we need to remove cess taxes. County governors who have not gotten cash. Exactly. County governors
how do we raise our revenue?
Who've not gotten cash for, 4 months.
And they need that on-source revenue to run things.
Because that's what they're using to pay salaries now.
Yeah, because by the
Treasury has not released money.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you ask farmers, you'll be like, hang on. I have my onions. I'm taking them from Narok. I'm bringing them to Nairobi. You guys charge me cess tax when I cross from one county line to the next. Show me the value for that money. Am I getting better roads? No. Am I getting irrigation services? No. Am I getting extension services either? No. So why am I paying you this cash? Where is the value for money? There's no straightforward answer there.
You know, there's a question that you asked Ndu. There is a certain Africanness about the way we treat people in leadership. It's a politeness of sorts. President Museveni spoke of it. When you speak to people and you're considered a leader, they tend to listen. It doesn't mean they're agreeing with you. They're being polite. And if you're in a position of leadership, it's very rare that as Africans will tell you to your face, get lost. Very rarely. Now, what our politicians do is take advantage of that.
That's what I was going to say. They ride on that very same thing because they know that nobody's going to actually tell them what they really think about how they've been able, they've run things.
What they should be concerned about is what those very people who seem to be mute, deaf and dumb discuss away from them and how it, because then when they talk among themselves, they talk about the reality of what they know. Which means they know. And they've also assessed you as the leader, and there is a position they have given you. The only person who doesn't know it is you. Now, this is a discussion that is going to be ongoing. Now, which is going to overtake the other first? The desperation that people have in the country, are we going to be held together by this glue of the hope for the future ad infinitum? Or are people going to get to a point and say, you know, folks, thank you. We've had enough. We've had enough of this nonsense. Okay? We've had enough of it. Because it appears that amidst all this suffering, there are people who, those in power, are determined to keep living in the land of the fat, or where there's a lot of fat. Meaning, they already have and they're being given more.
And that's what government has become.
Yes.
Government has become this one place that you go to just get the fat.
Yes, you do.
Right?
Yes.
And if you look at some of these personalities who are now joining government as CASs, these are people who 780,000 shillings a month is nothing. Their own revenues and from other sources are 10 times that.
There are people who could pay all the CSS salaries on a monthly basis.
Exactly.
And probably not feel a pinch.
Without naming names, we can see them there in those lists. But why are they joining government now? Is it just to serve the public?
No,
really?
Serve the public.
So where exactly would somebody
do
be
even know
going
what serving the public is?
If you are in a political position and you were meant to serve the public, and there's scant confirmation of you having done the same, how are you going to do it now? If you've been in politics and all along you're supposed to be serving the public,
and you didn't.
And so now, what is this magical thing that will have happened that will turn you around?
The conversation continues in the next hour. Let's talk about this economy. The president says it's improving. Is it really?